civil servants have told companies to collect gender pay gap figures based on how their workers identify rather than their biological sex, potentially skewing the data. It means the salaries of biological men could be lumped in with women. All companies with more than 250 staff are required to report their gender pay gap as part of the government's aim to close it. Last year, the gender pay gap for full-time employees was 7.7%. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch has promised to intervene on the issue, with campaigners saying the statistics could be manipulated and trends in women's wages going unnoticed. A government spokesperson says the responsibility for accurately reporting the figures is down to individual organizations. Well, if you play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You can now see a whole Adam's apple in a dress claiming that he's making 70p to every man's pound. And we have to take this person seriously because this is where we are now. And look, the good news is if all men identify as women, the gender pay gap will vanish tomorrow. One thing I will say, though, is I'm quite skeptical about this legislation because for some reason, we're looking at the gender pay gap, but we're not asking why. So if you have a company, for instance, where more women are working part-time to spend more time at home, for instance, the government now sees that as an issue because there's a gender pay gap, but they're not asking why. And you have to think, is this actually a conservative government? Because they're not using social policy to back up what is actually desirable in society. Like, I don't know, people staying at home with their children so that childcare is better managed, or they're not shoved off to daycares, for instance. But I don't think that's going to happen soon.
Well, I mean, I don't know how they measure. That's a really interesting point. I don't know how they measure the gender pay gap in taking account that fact that a lot of women do leave the workforce to bring up their children, or they go part-time in order to bring up their children. That's a choice they make, and it's a choice they have the right to make. What I think is completely balmy, and I don't think it's skewing the figures yet. I can't believe the numbers are in any kind of shape or form significant, that people can self-identify as female and then be put in the female category, having, say, earned a male salary, if I can put it that way, more than their female equivalent. And suddenly, you know, you could see the bosses looking at the gender pay gap figures at the end of the year and then calling in 10 guys and saying, guys, next year you're going to be women. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes, we've solved the problem.
Exactly.
What I don't understand about this kind of stuff, and I say this a lot, at some point, a load of officials somewhere went into a room to discuss this.
Yeah.
Didn't one of them say that? Didn't one of them go, there's a problem here, because clearly, just by definition of this, you just need one senior executive on a very high salary to hop over the fence to the female camp and identify from being Sydney to... Well, you can keep with Sydney, really. But you just need one person to do that, and because bearing in mind the gender issue, which is a very curious way of working out fairness and equality and all the rest of it, is done collectively. So one person would skew the entire figure if they were on some impressive six-figure salary. And you've solved the problem. So it's actually it's unfair to women in that respect, but it's also bonkers in every other respect.
So in the US, I think trans women, for every 60 cents that trans women are paid, other workers, male and female, get paid $1, basically. So in the US, and I think that mirrors here as well, that trans women are actually technically discriminated against in the workplace in terms of what they're earning.
But there's the skewed figure for you,
but there's a skewed figure.
Because they're not getting... They don't go for the same job and get paid less.
No, but would it not be possible just to have men's, women's and trans when you're looking at these stats?
Yeah, exactly. So you could work out if there is... It's totally right to work out if there's pay discrimination against trans women or trans men or trans people.
But Ed, your initial point about the numbers would be so tiny. The numbers would be so tiny. Can you imagine if you said to a company, a treasurer or whatever, CEO, you've got to give us 3 different figures instead of 2 different figures. You're adding to the bureaucracy the company has got to fill in reports and so on without learning anything.
I mean, well, we have a win for equality whilst we are talking about this, because apparently while men are being paid more, they're also working less. That's according to figures released today from the Office of National Statistics. Men have been working an hour less each week since the pandemic, while women are working more hours than ever before.
Now, that's something I could get behind.
Really?
I could get behind men working less, women working harder. I'm all for that.
Absolutely not.
That's something equality-wise,
it hasn't happened for,
that we have to get behind.
for hundreds of years.
Wait, the equality has been closed by the number of hours worked.
About physical hours, then men over the course, let's do another wacky stat. Over the last 500 years, who's worked most hours?
Yeah,
probably men.
That's true. And it's also...
It's not because they're better.
Is this your revenge?
They just have.
But also, Collins is right. It's not our fault.
Just a fact.
It's not our fault that we work smarter than women do. That's what I thought. Am I right, boys?
I think
I think
Ian,
we can do about these
Ian, Ed, and JJ are on a suicide chat show mission.
Yes.
Where we, in about 30 seconds, will have been completely cancelled.
Correct.
And in fact, our years and years of very hard-working men that we are is about to go down the plug hole.
Nah,
I hope people realise we are being light-hearted. And I don't know why this statistic has come about that men are working a few hours less during the pandemic. It may well be that more people are working from home and that has skewed the figures. Maybe working was counted as commuting because you are, in theory, when you're on that train into the office, you're at work because that's when your working day starts.
Stop trying to defend it. Stop trying to figure it out.
Well, I'm desperately trying to hold on to my job, JJ.
Has been making these figures up. It's fine.